This is From Destruction to Dignity with Janice Pons. Each week, Janice shares her wisdom to enlighten, educate, and advance the culture in America today. Janice Pons is a mother, author, and free thinker, and your host for our podcast this evening. Now let's join your host, Janice Pons.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. Come on in. Come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you so much for continuing to tune in to this show, this podcast. My name is Janice Pons. I am your host on this show, this podcast, From Destruction to Dignity, Clinical Perspective, Spiritual Truths. We're going to dive in because we got so much to cover. I want to give a shout out to my fellow Americans in the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America in the great state of Oklahoma. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we had a vote that we did back in March where we were voting on whether or not marijuana would be, recreational marijuana would be legalized. Medical marijuana is already legalized. People have a right to have their business here in the great state of Oklahoma as long as they follow specific guidelines. My understanding is that there is a lot of violation of those guidelines. That's a whole other podcast. However, the state question related to marijuana becoming recreationally legal here in our state, it failed, and it failed in a big manner. 62% of the voters in this great state said, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do it. So shout out, kudos. I voted. No, we don't want it. And there are many reasons why. And we're going to dive into that right now because there's so much. We're going to dive in the damaging effects of smoking marijuana. Now, I can feel you right now. I know there are going to be some people. Just come on in and make your comments right there on my social media comments, because I have some scientific data to come right back at you. And because all I want to do is deal with truth, because we want to provoke thought, bring awareness, and point people towards intervention. And this is fair use. It's all under the umbrella of fair use. So marijuana, what's the big deal about marijuana? Well, let's look at it from a medical perspective. We're looking at the damaging effects of smoking marijuana. And the first thing that comes to my mind is when you smoke tobacco. Tobacco. And what is in tobacco? Formaldehyde, acetone. We could go on and on and on and on. A pack of cigarettes. The last time I checked, a pack of Marlboros here in Tulsa was $10.62 a pack. Wait a minute. I think it went up $10.85 a pack. People can spend their money on whatever they want to spend it on because they're grown. But I am talking about medical issues. And people just get into this thing about marijuana, but it doesn't have any medical effects on people. It's not harmful at all. Well, let's look at that. We're going to look at some things tonight. The damaging effects of smoking marijuana. Yes, there Janice goes talking about damaging effects of marijuana. So, under fair use, let's talk about, I look at the trends. I look at the research. It doesn't matter what I think. I like to provoke thought, bring awareness, point people towards intervention. They decide what they want to do from there. So there was a 2-part research study that suggests that frequent cannabis is a risk factor for CAD, coronary artery disease. In the first part of this research that was done, and we're going to get into details here in a minute. Just stick with me here. We're going somewhere, and it's expecting us when we get there. In the first part, it was an observational study. I call it looking at the empirical data. I was trained as a psychologist, and I looked at a lot of empirical data that I couldn't deny. Empirical data says. So the observational study part of this, the first part, dealt with daily cannabis use, and it was associated with 30 34% higher odds for coronary artery disease compared with never users in a large population based on a large population based U.S. cohort. Less frequent use was not associated with increased odds for CAD, coronary artery disease. 34% higher odds. Okay, the second part of this study, people with a genetic susceptibility to cannabis use disorder or severe cannabis dependency. You know, we've talked a lot about stages of addiction, mild, moderate, severe. Dependency, substance abuse, recreational use, substance abuse, substance dependency. We're not going to break that down tonight, not for tonight. I love to show my visual on that though, but those who looked at me for a while, you've seen that. There's dependency where pretty much they're dependent. They have to have it to feel normal. So the second part of this study, people with a genetic susceptibility to cannabis use or disorder or severe cannabis dependency had an increased risk of CAD, coronary artery disease, compared with other people. Now think about it. Come on, guys. Come on. Let's get intellectually honest here. Smoke going in your lungs. Did God design your lungs to take in to hold that smoke in your lungs? Is that why he designed your lungs? Think about it. Dr. Ihsan Paranjep, medical doctor, the study's lead author, reported that these results in a press briefing that he shared is going to be presented this year in joint scientific sessions at the American College of Cardiology and the World Heart Federation this year. So this doctor, Dr. Ihsan, he said that a couple of takeaway points are very relevant, and it has to do with daily cannabis use. It's daily, not frequent, but daily. And a lot of folks smoke weed daily. We're talking about smokers. It's a whole nother thing with the edible thing, but we're talking about smokers. Those that smoke marijuana daily, it has been associated with coronary artery disease. So, if it's connected with coronary artery disease, is connected with heart disease. People don't want to hear that. They smoke weed every day. Here's something we can't dismiss, guys. Our lungs were not designed to be taken in to smoke. Come on, let's just use common sense. The notion that cannabis is completely benign is probably wrong. And it's down the line. You remember vaping? And when vaping came out, I had a check in my spirit about vaping. It's been proven it causes all kind of issues. I knew something was wrong. Again, something going inside your lungs, and you're holding it in there. So to think that cannabis daily cannabis use for sure is benign is probably wrong. And there might be a certain risk of certain cardiovascular effects of cannabis that we should be looking into more. So the conclusion that this study that they did, is that the main conclusion was that prevalent CAD is associated with cannabis consumption. Those are medical doctors, guys. These are cardiologists. This isn't Janice on a bandwagon. So it's connected to vascular inflammation as well, which is connected to CAD. So what's that? Circulatory functioning, our blood vessels, so forth and so on, having to do with the vascular functioning of our bodies. This warrants more work, more consideration regarding the physiological effects of that smoke in our lungs as it relates to our vascular functioning, is it related to inflammation, so forth and so on. Now, this American Heart Association has the chairman of it, Robert Page. He's the chair of a writing group for the American Heart Association. And they were looking specifically at medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, cardiovascular health. And this is what he concluded. This adds to our hypothesis that if you are using marijuana over a long period of time, the longer the period of time of use of smoking it, the greater exposure you're going to have an increased risk of arteriosclerosis, cardiovascular disease. Those are the medical folk. They are seeing an increased risk of ASCVD, arteriosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, in young adults ages 18 to 40. And these people, that age group, a lot of times they think they're invincible. It doesn't cause any medical problems at all. Well, they're showing up at doctors' offices. They're showing up at cardiologists and respiratory doctors having these issues. And that's the group where there is the highest amount of use. So let's look at lung damage. Oh, wow. Lung damage appears to look the worst in pot smokers. Regular smokers of marijuana appear to be at greater risk for lung damage than people who smoke just tobacco alone. They smoke cigarettes and cannabis, marijuana. So, see, there's this public perception that marijuana is safe. This is what a medical doctor who's a radiologist at the University of Ottawa was talking about. It's just this conception. It's safe. It's what's the big deal? Come on. Get up off of it, guys. Why y'all talking about something's wrong with marijuana? But she began to wonder, and from her medical perspective, began to wonder what cannabis use does to the lungs that's so different than cigarette smoking. To me, it's just like, well, it's a foreign substance that's in the lungs. So she and her colleagues examined chest CT scans from 56, not 65, sorry. They examined chest CT scans from 56 marijuana smokers and compared them to scans of 57 non-smokers and 33 users of tobacco alone. Now, emphysema was significantly more common among marijuana smokers, 75%, than among non-smokers, 5%. I wonder if they got that from secondhand smoke. People die from secondhand smoke. That's proven. I saw a commercial of a little child, 7 years old, and said, "Oh, I stopped smoking again." They were secondhand. They were in the car with their parents, who were smokers. They were the victims of secondhand smoke. "I've stopped smoking again," 7-year-old. Emphysema was significantly more common among marijuana smokers, 75%, as compared to non-smokers, 5%. When matched for age and sex, 93% of marijuana smokers had emphysema. versus 67% of those who smoked cigarettes or tobacco only. Without age matching, rates of emphysema remain slightly higher among the marijuana users, 75% versus 67%. Although the difference was no longer statistically significant, yet more than 40% of the marijuana group was younger than 50 years old. And all of the tobacco-only users were 50 or older. What does this mean? That marijuana smokers may develop lung damage earlier or with less exposure. They are seeing more and more younger patients showing up with emphysema. Where are they getting it from? Secondhand smoke? Direct smoke? Marijuana smokers also showed higher rates of airway inflammation, including bronchial thickening, bronchial shatasis, and mucoid impaction, impacted with mucus. These are doctors. These are doctors talking. They just said, as they were talking, shop talking scientifically, they said this is not surprising at all. Says Dr. Alan Kaplan, a medical doctor, family physician in Ontario. They get together and they discuss these kinds of things, and they said his expertise was in respiratory health, and he did a review in 2021 on cannabis and lung health. And pulmonary experts noted that the new data gives context to a recent uptick in referrals for non-traumatic pneumonia thorax. The author said that they had received 22 of these referrals during the past 2 years, but previously in 2012, between 2012 and 2020, they only had 6. So it was just an uptick. Why are they seeing all these young people with emphysema and impacted mucus and all this? The common thread was marijuana smoking. Many, they said not all, but many were documented. They had a history of marijuana use. Most often, those that used daily. See, when you smoke marijuana, you take this deep breath in, you hold it in your lungs, there's all this pressure. How does it affect the lungs? So, these doctors are now conducting a larger prospective study to see whether they can confirm. They're going deeper, and it's warranted. It's warranted. So many people say marijuana, it doesn't cause any problems. Well, this is what they're concluding. They're saying you need to be asking patients about their cannabis smoking. Do you smoke cigarettes? Well, add that on. And I had a medical procedure done last week, and they got into the drug use. Or do you use drugs? The answer is no. Mm-hmm. Many do, and that's just where they are. That's just how it is. This warrants serious consideration because younger groups of people are coming down with CAD and bronchial inflammation, and it's all being connected to cannabis use. Now, when we did this vote in Oklahoma, I did a short video clip. You can go on my Facebook page and you can see it back around the beginning of March. And I was talking about, and I got blasted, but won't be the first time I got blasted. I got blasted by marijuana users saying, marijuana is not ever laced with fentanyl. No, it's not. Well, I beg to differ because in 2022 in Summerville, South Carolina, Somerville police were asking the community to be very careful after actually finding marijuana that was laced with fentanyl. And it was connected to 2 drug overdose investigations. It's not a huge prevalence of it, but sometimes people just not doing the right thing, guys. They don't care. It's all about getting people addicted, and it's all about the bottom line dollar. So officers say that the laced marijuana could have a factor in the overdoses. It was marijuana laced in with fentanyl. It was laced with fentanyl. Now, how common is it that marijuana is laced with fentanyl? Well, there is a case here in Tulsa where someone died, and the toxicology reported, well, he had just been smoking some pot. Well, it showed he had fentanyl in his system as well. He had smoked marijuana. They tested it was marijuana laced with fentanyl. It's happening. All you got to do is sprinkle it on there. All right, so a lot of people are smoking pot. More people are smoking marijuana these days. So laced weed is more commonly reported than it was before. So police have publicized, this is in Canada, they really are talking about this, okay? Over here in our country, our nation, they want to minimize it. Marijuana is not laced with fentanyl, it's laced with cocaine. It's heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine is laced with fentanyl, and they found it in marijuana as well. End of story. What are the dangers of it? If you have marijuana, which people say are so safe, it's safe. Well, you can overdose. Bottom line, you can overdose. The fentanyl-laced marijuana, it shows dangerous reactions. You can get the wrong joint, and you can end up in an emergency room or a morgue. How do people react? Well, say, well, they wouldn't act like that if they were smoking marijuana. Did they become aggressive? Did they become psychotic? Did their breathing change? Did they start having heart problems, but they were just smoking weed? Did they start hearing things and seeing things that other people were not hearing or seeing? Did they? Listen, most users report that they know if they've smoked some marijuana that was tainted. And this is pretty much what's reported, that within 15 or 20 minutes after finishing a joint, they know something is wrong, and they start freaking out. They start tripping out because they start experiencing these different sensations than what normal, regular weed would cause them to feel. Severe hallucinations, impaired coordination. They cannot stand up. Their slurred speech. Usually people, they smoke weed, they can still quote unquote function, so to speak, but they become aggressive, they become violent, they become disoriented, they become paranoid, they start having seizures. Tainted marijuana, laced marijuana, more than likely. Some fall into comas and some die. Embalming fluid, formaldehyde, is it's called, the street name is called embalming fluid. It causes a lot of confusion, and people are putting that on weed and smoking it, okay? So listen, fentanyl-laced marijuana is especially dangerous, but listen, here we go. I could go on. I love talking about addiction. It's my area of specialty. I have a passion. It took out my family. It's taken out my colleagues. It's taken out people that I know and love, and I have no problem going there. The people that are in my family that died prematurely, they asked me to go there. I have family members that are uncomfortable. I'm sorry that you are, but all it does is motivate me more because people are dying. And what would happen if we as a family band together and just made this a powerful platform? What would happen? Might we save some lives? So here we go. Where are we going to go with all this going on? The one thing, let me just identify this real quick. So how are you going to tell if it's lace? You can smell it. It doesn't smell right. You can even look at it. It might have some white crystals in it. It's like, what is this? This doesn't even look like weed. Weed usually has a kind of a natural look, greenish, but so, it has these buds, they have different colors. But when it has all this whiteness in it and crystals, it might be tainted. And then they're testing for it. I know a friend of mine who's in California. She said that her daughter lives out there and they have these testing strips for fentanyl. And that before anybody gets high, California has these testing strips. It's supposed to be for testing to see if your urine and maybe substance abuse treatment programs or in employment programs or whatever. But they're you better test this out before you get high. True story, California. Okay. So, where do we go? Let's look at, me, provoking thought, bringing awareness and pointing people towards intervention because it is direly needed. Okay, guys, go ahead and put up that visual, please. Where do we go from here? I could go on and on, right? And you all know I can't. Anybody that knows me, this addiction thing is my passion in terms of helping people provoke thought, bring awareness, and point people towards intervention. It has to be a lifestyle change. And this is wellness for anybody. These are just thoughts of just how we can live a better quality of life. Primping every day. Well, how do we, say, I ain't smoking weed no more. How do I do that? When I was running a substance abuse treatment program, everybody started their day with primp. P-R-I-M-P. P, the first thing you do when you wake up, pray. Pray. P for pray. R for read. Read something positive every day. I start off reading the Word of God and then I read recovery literature. It might be on boundaries. It might be on maturity. It's something that's going to contribute to my mental wellness, but it starts off for me with the Word. You have to decide what works for you. P-R-I-M-P. Pray, read, inventory. Inventory is where you look at yourself. What is it that I need to be working on? What I need to be working on? Not them. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. What do I need to be working on? And having a plan that's executed, that is observable and measurable, that addresses that. M is for meditate. Quiet time. Don't you go saying, well, they talk about meditation. Yeah, just getting quiet, and just getting quiet, peaceful, thinking on good things, and then pray. Start your day in prayer, end it in prayer. Primp every day. Then there's the 3 C's. People that do the 3 C's and are very intentional, where whatever you're doing in terms of your wellness, you're continual, you're constant, and you're consistent. Exercise, water, reading, praying, inventory of yourself, being consistent, continual, and constant. And then there's 8 before 8. God gave me this years ago when I really locked down on being intentional with my recovery and wellness and just really pursuing a path that was good for me. 8 before 8. He said, Janice, I want you to do this. And it really helped me a lot. And I've shared it with others and they're like, oh my God, it structures my day. It helps me. First thing, pray the moment your eyes wake up. 2, read the Word of God. 3, read something to enrich yourself, for sure, including recovery literature. 4, drink 4 glasses of water. I've increased mine to 6. 6 glasses of water before I leave the house to go to work. Stretch and exercise some kind of way. I stretch before I get up. I do 100 crunches there in the bed. I'm moving my body. It helps me. I'm getting rid of weight. I'm getting rid of, not losing, right? I want to get rid of it. Listen to, positive, praise and worship music. that edifies me, that lifts me up. Listen to someone ministering the word of God that facilitates my spiritual growth, and to eat something positive. And eat something positive, eat something healthy. That's a positive thing to do. Eat something positive. And when I do that, like I eat a boiled egg, that gets my metabolism going. Listen, we have to be intentional, because I'm telling you what, addiction is incredibly intentional. And the goal is to take us out. But we want to go from destruction to dignity, because God has a good path. And you know what? It includes us not being high. God bless you. Good night. I love y'all. Good night.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of From Destruction to Dignity with Janice Pons. Janice's mission is to provoke thought, bring awareness, and point people towards intervention when needed. As a reminder, this show is not therapy, but for educational purposes only. For more information, check out JanicePons.com or follow her on social media.
Education, affirmation, dedication, information.